All right, well, I want to welcome everyone. It's great to see a big crowd here. When I was out on the show floor today, I had a total of 6 people tell me that they were going to show up for this program, so I was expecting to see 6 of you out there. So now we got a party. As we go through the slides, if you have any questions on the slide that's on the screen, feel free to yell out, ask the question. I don't want to spend too much time on each slide because I believe there's 107 slides, so if you figure that by minutes, we got to roll through this pretty quick. So, and I do want to introduce Dave. So when we got involved in this dig, Dave was my digging partner, so he's going to be here to kind of jog my memory if a question comes up and I don't have the answer to it. You'll notice that it says California Glass Insulator Company and California Glass Works. California Glass Insulator Company, they produced the very first insulators in April of 1912. Okay, that was the first month that they started producing insulators. It was June of 1912, they actually produced their first crown top soda bottles. That's what you see over there to the left on the table. And then in August of 1913, the general manager, Robert P. Frist, was actually released from his position as manager. The Bloom Jar Company merged with the company. And then in January of 1914, California Glass Works was incorporated into the company. They reorganized, I should say. July 31st of 1914 was the very last date of production. So it was about 2 years, 3 months in business under different leaderships. You think about all the glass insulators out there made by California. There seems to be a lot of them out there. They actually produced insulators for about 1.5 years because there was some downtime. There was downtime from summer shutdowns, and we all heard about the 1916 flood that wiped out the plant, and we used to think that that was when the plant ended production, but they ended production in July of 1914. So for 1.5 years, they produced all those insulators that are out there. They produced millions and millions and millions of insulators. After that, a flood did occur in 1916, but that was when the plant was set idle. A new company came in and bought it. The Consolidated Securities Company bought it. They eventually sold the building to another company that was going to make glass coffins, of all things. And I don't know whatever happened to all the machinery after that, but there was an article that stated that there was a gentleman that went into the plant, I guess on downtime when the caretaker wasn't watching the plant, and stole a lot of machinery for salvage. So a lot of machinery probably got scrapped. We don't know of any molds, any machinery, anything. Even when we dug at the site, we didn't find much in the way of metal or anything. There's the California Glass Insulator Company, blown and pressed glassware. And you notice they do say blown and pressed. I believe this is an undated photo, but I believe this was at the very beginning. This was when they were having a big open house. If you look at the group of people there in the front, most of them are local dignitaries, more than likely, Chamber of Commerce, some of the board of the glass company. The pressed glassware was for the insulator production because they were pressed in a mold. And then the blown was, again, they planned on doing bottles in the future, which they did only, maybe 3 months later, and they made the crown top soda bottles. I don't know of anything else that was made at the plant. When Dave and I dug there, we didn't find anything else associated to the company other than a bunch of cullet, and that's what you're going to start seeing here pretty soon. Just to give you an idea, there's the California Glass Works, or Glass Insulator Company. You're seeing kind of a back view from it. You see the big water tower there. They pumped water from a well down below. To the left was what they call the engine room or the machine room. And then to the right, that's the big major plant there. The Child Labor Union in 1913 reported that I think it was 874 boys between the age of 14 and 16 worked in the glass plants in the United States. There was already some child labor laws working in there to get kids younger than that out. But I believe probably most of the underpaid workers there were probably boys around the age of 16, because they actually advertised for help looking for boys 16 and older. It's out on the outskirts of Long Beach at the time. I mean, now it isn't, but at the time it was, it was out, they called it kind of like out on the salt flats. It was not too far from the coastline. It was undeveloped property. They were kind of diverting some flood water, channels and stuff, trying to get companies to come in. They didn't divert well enough because there ended up being 3 floods, not just the major one at the end. That factory was flooded a couple times before then when they were actually in operation. Robert P. Frist himself, he worked on the West Coast, and he held like numerous patents. A lot of the guys were East Coasters that came in. But then the younger boys, they were probably locals. But the guys that sort of really, ran the plant, they seemed to be mostly Easterners. So that's kind of the plant. Just kind of picture that. This is an interesting photograph. And again, you can look at the two. I mean, they look like they're maybe 16, those two guys there. They're standing there packing those barrels. They did say that they actually... once the insulators were annealed, they stacked them outside, and you can kind of see, if you look closely right here, how well they're stacked, and then they're just kind of jumbled back here. I'm not sure what's going on here in the front, but when I look at this closely, I see more than one CD there, so that could possibly be the reject pile. They were having some issues, especially initially getting, insulators pressed right. I don't know, this is maybe only, a month or two into production, but that could be the area that Dave and I dug, just the basis of that pile. So this is a Sanborn fire insurance map from 1914. So things changed a little bit here, but this is really interesting. So and this is where I really wanted to use my pointer. If you look here, this is the main building that I just pointed out with the big smokestack coming out of the center of it. You see that kind of rectangle with the rounded bottom on it? That was the furnace. So if you look to the left of that, it says Sand House, the building to the far left upper. That's where the sand was kept. And then they also kept the soda and lime and all the other ingredients used for making glass. All that material was weighed precisely. It was put into wheelbarrows, and the boys mixed it in the wheelbarrows. They wheelbarrowed the mix to a conveyor. The conveyor took it up to the top level of the furnace. The furnace had 2 levels. The ingredients were dropped in there. They were melted at 24 to 3,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Once it melted down, then it dropped down into the lower section of the furnace, and from there it mixed in with what was already hot. So you see the 2-tone cows out there? It was a change of batch, mix, change of color, and that's probably what caused those. One was, merging with the other. And then it dropped down to that loop part, and it flowed into that loop area, and that's where the glory holes were. They had 9 glory holes, and the glory holes are where the gatherers actually gathered the glass by hand, put into the mold. So around that area, just below that loop area, that's where the machines sat. And they called the machine shops. And they had 5 shops or 5 machines sitting in that area. And they had 5 men, boys, whatever, working each one of those. So you had 25 workers working 5. So you had 5 workers. The first worker actually was a guy that walked over with the gathering rod, and he gathered the glass out of the glory hole. So he's carrying this hot molten glass, carefully measured as he spins the rod, over to the machine. You got the second guy that actually is the presser, the machine operator, and he would have the mold open. So the gatherer would drop that taffy-like glass down into the mold, and the presser would have shears. So between the two of them, they had to be pretty precise about the amount of glass that would go in the mold. And we've all seen overpours and we've seen underpours, okay? Somebody wasn't very precise. But he would cut that glass as it was falling in there, and then he would operate the machine, plunger would come down and plunge it. And then the third worker would actually take the plunger out. I don't know why it took one guy to do that, but he would remove the plunger. Then would move on to the fourth guy, worker, boy, whatever, and he would actually remove the plunger. Third guy removed the plunger. Fourth guy actually opened up the mold, and he would take the glass out, the molten glass out, put it on a tray, and then the fifth worker would carry that tray once it was filled over to the annealing of it. And that would be the beginning of the annealing oven would be right here. So they would carry that over. It looks like there might have been 3 conveyors in the layer or annealing oven, and the tray would go on that, and then there would be a conveyor that would move very, very slowly. It would take 12 to 24 hours of annealing to get from one end, approximately 1100 degrees, to the other end, as you get down there toward where it says packing, and that's where then the glass would be taken out of the annealing oven. So 12 to 24 hours for that process, very, very slowly moving the insulators through that annealing oven. Then once they got to the end, that would be air temperature. They'd take them out, and then they claimed that they took the insulators and put them outside and let them sit out there and cure for 3 months. I don't believe that because I saw reports of they opened in April of 1912 and they're already shipping in May of 1912. So, but you got the packing house there. I believe that might have come later. I think most everything was done outside initially. Yeah, and the thing about it too is I say 12 to 24 hours. It would depend on the glass. If you have something that was kind of odd shaped, like maybe a 201, you got thin areas of glass and thick areas of glass, you got to go a little bit slower. If you got a pony, you can go fast. It's just, so. But this is a photograph that I first saw, and I received a message from Bob Starr on a Monday. It was May 6th. I came home from work early, and Bob said, "Hey, Dwayne, give me a call." I don't hear from Bob that often. We're just saying, "Hey, Dwayne, give me a call," so I thought something's up. I gave Bob a call, and he said, "I just got off the phone with a guy in Long Beach that has a property. He's really interested in knowing a little bit more about what he's finding, and he would like to see some of that saved." And I thought, well, I've been a bottle digger for years. There's nobody like that out there. Usually you got to get down on your hands and knees and beg, to get onto somebody's property to dig anything. And I thought, okay, give me the guy's name, and Bob says, well, I'm going to give you a photo. And I see this photo, and it was like, boom, I hit that phone as fast as I could because I saw that egg. There's an egg up there, and there's some really interesting stuff. So I thought, this is kind of for real. So I called this guy called Todd. His name is Todd Tirico, and we had a long discussion, and basically it came down to the point where he said, I want to see this stuff saved. It's, it has some historical significance to it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's like skid. You just don't find people that are that interested. This guy wants to move forward with a project. He wants to put up a multi-million-dollar business, and he's going to actually let me go in there and dig. But so this was the property before it was actually developed. You can see the sign over to the right, and it says it's in escrow. Okay, so this is what it looked like. There's an oil rig you can see sort of in the center left of the photo. When Dave and I first arrived there, we walked onto the property. We weren't really sure what we were going to find. All I remembered was I got a call from Todd on a Wednesday, and he said, you need to get over here. There's glass everywhere. And I couldn't get there fast enough. It was an hour and a half drive for me, and it seemed like it took 15 hours. So Dave and I walked onto the property, and this photo right here isn't the exact photo, but when we first walked onto the property, I saw one blue insulator. That was the first insulator I saw, sitting on a little berm where they had already moved soil around. We walked around this big berm that they had piled dirt up on, and this is what we found. There were insulators everywhere. There was window glass. All that white stuff you see is window glass. I mean, at first we couldn't make heads or tails of what we were seeing. I'm seeing window glass. I'm thinking, oh, they made window glass. I'm seeing soda bottles. I'm seeing all kinds of things. Broken demijohns, broken seltzer bottles, blue insulators, yellow insulators. It was kind of confusing at first. So I'm standing there talking to those guys, and I said, hey, there was a picture I got, and there was this thing in there. It's called an egg. And did you guys see any of these eggs? They're shaped about like this. And the one guy goes, yeah, kind of like Pac-Man. And I said, yeah. He reaches down right where we were standing and picks up that thing right there, and that's a yellow egg. So that was the first time we saw a yellow egg. It was covered with dirt. I picked it up. I thought, okay, it's a California egg, and then I realized it was a small size. Never seen one in yellow before. And this is the back side of that same berm, so you can see the yellow California right in the middle. It took a day and a half to 2 days for Dave and I to really realize what was going on. Finally cleaned off the end of one of them, and we saw these initials that said RPF, patent applied for, instead of California, patent applied for, which we all are familiar with. Those are the manager's initials on that egg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was never before known, and I believe what happened was he was an inventor, he was a patentee of a lot of other related items, not really glass insulators, but fiber insulators actually. And I think, this is my theory, is that he probably was planning on filing a patent. He was making these as samples. He put his initials on them. Once he got the patent, then he was probably going to change it to California. Or maybe he was an egotistical manager and he wanted to leave his initials on there. I don't know. But anyway, that's what the RPF stands for. It was on the same initials are on the large egg and the small egg. Okay, next. And that's the solid port to the right there. So this kind of gives you a scope of the area that we dug in. I'd say the whole area was about 2 football fields of land that he was developing, but our area was just right in this area where it was all jumbled up. Todd, the owner, told the heavy equipment guys, stay at the other end of the property. I want these guys to gather some of this stuff up and save it. I mean, he was great to work with. So those guys stayed at the other end for the most part, but when we needed help, they brought the equipment over. I mean, we had it at our disposal. It was incredible. If any of you read the article, you remember my words, incredible? It was incredible. This is Todd Trigo. This is the owner. Great guy. So, he came over to me and he said, "Are you having fun yet?" And I said, "It's incredible." Then he came over to me and he says, "I got a box in the trunk of my car you might want to come over and look at." So I happen to have my camera in my hand because I was running around photographing stuff, and it was hard not to put my hands on things because I wanted to pick things up. But go over to his trunk and I took a picture of this. I didn't even reach in the trunk and touch any of those. I was so anxious to get out there and finish photographing. I didn't even think about picking one up to see if it was California embossed, but those two ended up being RPFs. And the next day he said, "You want that box in my trunk?" Okay. And Dave and I had found the small eggs up to that point, but we hadn't found any large ones yet, so those were the 2 large ones. So there's the excavator working for us. He's moving some soil. And the first box of glass that we started filling up on that first day, it was just a half a day on Thursday, because by the time I got there and Dave and I got there, Dave had to get off work, and it was, I think, 1 o'clock when we got there.
I was actually off.
Oh, you were off that day. That's right. Yeah. Okay. It's all in the story. I should know. I wrote it, right? But I did go off a lot of notes. I did take a lot of notes each day. Some people say, "How can you remember all that?" Well, it was from notes. Next. Okay, that proves I was there. And I am giving a thumbs up, but I got a glove on, so you can't really see it all. Next. And then that's just a layer of a swath that they took with one of the buckets and dumped it out of the cullet layer. So we finally realized that we had a cullet area, we had an area of the earlier blue aqua glass, and then we had an area of yellow glass that was off to the side of that, which was their later production. This is all cullet. All those bottles you see laying there in the foreground, those are all basically Puritas bottles, Los Angeles ice and cold storage bottles. They were tool top bottles. California only made machine bottles. That was 1912. They had a semi-automatic machine. So, again, you learn all this as you go along, and it was confusing at first, but this is all definitely cullet. Next. And then we saw the demijohns, or the carboys, the big 4 to 5 gallon bottles broken up, laying around. And we started thinking, okay, they did claim that they were going to make those, but I don't believe that they ever did. We found a lot of different designs and patterns and bases, and this is the top of one, but you notice what's in the middle of it. A piece of cork was still in it. They wouldn't put a cork in a bottle they're going to sell. So this was all just cullet, which is used glass, which is used in glass making. What it does is it lowers the melting point, so you use less energy. So there's always a certain percentage of cullet that was used in the making of glass insulators, usually all of them, I would say, until we got to modern times. But cullet was important, and cullet brought in all the great stuff that we like in insulators. Rocks, nails, steam, debris, all that stuff is created probably from the cullet. And then that's more of the window glass. Some of it was very thick. Some of it was, an inch thick, just pieces of window glass. And in the window glass, occasionally you would find an insulator. You see one there, but for the most part, you didn't see the insulators mixed with the cullet. I did find one Brookfield 160 broken pony and the top of a Aqua Santa Ana, and that was it. That was the only thing that we found that were non-California related. I like to think that that pony might have been a prototype for the mold maker, because they copied Brookfield a lot. I would say, based on what was there, when you saw that photo of it when the property was sold, the layer was probably 6 inches under that asphalt that was there that they ripped up. So we really didn't have a whole lot of overburden. When you see the photos of more overburden, that would be from the construction workers out there, the heavy equipment guys, building stuff up on top, and then we had to go back down through that. And then the layer of cullet and the layer of insulators, everything that we found, I would say, was 12 inches thick, maybe up to 18 in the thicker layers, but that's it. But this is just more bottles. But the interesting thing about this is, and this is all cullet, is you notice that piece of, looks like, art glass laying there. And occasionally you'd see that. And that would get mixed in with the glass batches. And if that didn't melt out good, that's where we see the swirls and mixes of other colors. And then I picked up a few pieces of milk bottles. There were milk bottles mixed in there too. I did stage this photo just with some samples. They were all tool top, which means they were earlier. They were pre-machine made. They were early. They had nothing to do with California. Different company names on the bases, different manufacturers. Next. And then these are pieces of the demijohns. I don't think we ever found the side of a demijohn. We always found the bases. All those big pieces are the big bases of the demijohns, or they call them carboys. And then you see some tops up there. Next. And then there's a amber bottle that was mixed in there. That's, again, Puritas. That was a cullet bottle, so that's where our amber comes from sometimes if it doesn't get mixed properly. Next. And that is tool top also. More cullet, just everywhere. I mean, you just start raking it out of that layer, and it's just, you got green glass, you got all sorts of different colors. Most of it was aqua, I would say, and then the window glass, mostly clear. To make it so easy on us, that was the gate there was 3 entrances. That was the gate that we used to come through. Todd gave us a combination and said, come and go as you please. And that worked out really good on the weekend. So this was the end of the first day of dig. Actually, the photo was later, but I just wanted to show you this is how we got in. So that first night, we were so excited. We went out and grabbed some of the eggs, went to the sink, washed them off, set them down, went in. Dave cracked a beer for me. We sat down there and had a beer each. I went back, looked at the eggs, and that's when I first saw the RPF. I mean, we just assumed they were California. And I just, I won't repeat what I said when I said, hey, Dave, you're not going to believe. All right, next. And those were the small eggs. Those are the 1130s. Okay, so Dave tries to catch me with my prison garb on here. I didn't take very much clothing with me the first day I went because I thought I was going to go home. So Pinky was nice enough to do my laundry for me in the meantime, but it was kind of cool that morning, so I had to kind of like double shirt. So I tried to get Dave back next, and I threw a shovel full of dirt at him, and he actually caught it in the air right there. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Next. And then there's Dave. Dave was there. Yeah. He's holding a yellow 166 top in his hand. Okay, next. And then as we got close to the sidewalk area, that's where we started hitting the yellow glass. I had the excavator actually open that up for me. That was all in layers. We didn't get a whole lot of that in float. I decided I'd rather dig it out, and it was not easy. Next. And there's the first big egg that we found. So we got pretty excited with that. So we had found the little ones, but we hadn't found any large ones, and we started getting into a pocket of those. And then here I got into a layer of the bottles. The one on the left actually had a C on the bottom, which kind of excited me. These were yellow, and they're what you see up there. I knew something was different here, and I realized, later these were made by California Insulator Company. The C actually stood for Crown City. It happened to be the soda manufacturer, and every one of those had a C on the bottom.
Crown City.
Yeah, from Pasadena, yeah. So none of the others had C's on them, and there were some unembossed ones too made by California. Nothing else had C's on them, so we figured that was their identification mark for the bottling company. But, it was really hard digging through this stuff. It was silty soil, from the floods that had gone through and just settled in between those and basically just encapsulated them. I'm guessing that the 1916 flood, which was the biggest one, probably wiped out everything that was on the surface that was left when they shut down and just infiltrated that last layer that was at the bottom, and it just basically entombed those, and that's what we were digging through, because there was nothing on the surface above that. And then that was the second day, and we decided to clean up a few more eggs, so that's what we found the second day. And you notice it varying, colors there. Kind of interesting, because we know that our Robert P. Frist was basically, let go in August of 1913. So we know that prior to that, they were making the yellow glass, because they started out with blue glass, and then they started getting into this yellow and green and, these other shades of glass. We think that at some point they changed the source of their sand, which might have caused that. I know as a fact that they did at least once, but possibly twice, and that's sort of outlined in the book also. And there's a 152 just right out of the ground, and other pieces laying in the background. Next. And all this stuff that you're seeing now is all yellow glass. It's hard to see when it's in the soil. In fact, when you're uncovering it, it almost looks purple because of the background colors around it. And that's 208 cross tops. These are incredible, and we do have one sample up there. Didn't find a whole one, but those are the Santa Anas, the 178 Santa Anas in yellow. Just incredible to see those. I only knew of one that existed prior to us finding those samples. John Contreras has one. Just a really pretty piece of glass, that big, that big spaceship looking thing in yellow glass. At about noon, I think Dave and I just had our lunch, or right before lunch or something, the owner of the construction company, heavy equipment company, showed up. He came over and asked us, "How you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing good." "You need me to bring the excavator over?" "Sure." So we got the owner of the heavy equipment company running that thing for us. He was going to do maintenance on his machines. So I'm running, that's me to the right there. I'm running around guiding him. I'm a big shot now, man. I'm telling this guy where I want, trenches dug and everything. And that darn thing does a 360-degree turn. I mean, it's amazing how fast that thing, and a couple times I had to run for my life because he was swinging that bucket around and it was coming right at me. Dave actually has a video of it. But it was, it was really fun to have, that there and to help us out a little bit. But at the same time, you worry about what's going to get broken. But we knew we were limited, as far as time, and we just had to get some stuff, moved around. And it helped a little bit. It kind of opened up the trenches for us, and then we worked into the trenches. Saturday night, I told Dave, "You know what? I think I got to go home tonight." And I called my wife and I said, "I'm coming home tonight." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, tomorrow's our 35th wedding anniversary, and I think I better come home." And when I got home, she actually told me that night, when I got home that Saturday night, she said, "I think you should go back tomorrow. It's a once-in-a-lifetime, chance." And I said, "I can't do it." So I had to stay home. So do I get all the points from the ladies in the room? So Dave went out there on Sunday. So that was one of the pieces he found. He found a California keg that day, and lots of other little things, a lot of samples. Dave operated the steam department in a major hospital in Long Beach, and he'd already called in sick with California fever 2 days, and it was kind of important for him to go back to work. There's people in hospitals that need him. So this was an interesting layer that we had found, and I called it the glassmaker's shards dump. It was a small area where all that stuff that you see there, especially laying below the shovel, looks like gravel. That's all pieces of small glass. That started out mostly the blue aqua, and then for some reason it advanced into the yellow, kind of in that same area. And it was real easy to dig into, so I liked that. When my arms were, breaking down on me, I'd go over and dig that one a little bit. So back to the layer again with a really hard, silty, almost like concrete soil. Finally dug out the very first bottle that actually had embossing on it. That one happened to be from San Bernardino. Next. And that was made by California. So then once I got into that layer, I had to, go back up and then move overburden that the tractors had left behind to get down into it again. And I took a swipe of my shovel for the first time, kicking this surface soil out of the way, and this thing comes flying out of there, and it's a solid pour. Unfortunately, the back is gone off it, but solid pours were never annealed, so it's amazing that it even survived, in that much. But it's a 133 California solid pour. Just a really cool piece. It would go from bottles to insulators, and then as you dug the insulators out, they were actually sort of segregated almost by CD. It was interesting. So I'm kind of picturing, those two boys that were sorting and tossing stuff out, this pile would get big, and then they'd go to the next pile over here, and then it all became one big conglomeration. But so that's suddenly you just got the heads of 160s all showing up. That would be my little digging unit. It was about that long with a handle on the end of it, and it's got a spring steel, kind of like a putty knife on the end of it, and you could use that and jab and carefully work your way around when the shovel was getting a little bit too cumbersome. I love this photo. When I pulled that out, I'm like, what is this? And what it is, it's the top of a Crown Top soda. No, this is a Crown Top soda sticking out of the bottom of a 160. It just came out of the ground like that, and I had to set it aside and photograph it. It's probably my favorite photo. I was told Sunday night that Monday may be our last day, and it turned out to be our last day. Todd was probably losing money every day to the tune of maybe $10,000, allowing us to dig that. And he says, I got to get this project going. So actually on Wednesday, they went in and they removed everything from that area, spread it out on the other end, crushed it all, and brought it back in for compaction because they had to have everything compacted, to code. So this is what it looked like, but 4 or 5 days after, Dave went over and took a photograph of it. Kind of a sad moment, but next. This is stuff that I brought home. Everything went to my house, dirty, filthy. This chain we found in a pile of metal that the construction guys, heavy equipment guys had set aside. Dave and I think that could possibly be a chain that was on one of the conveyors, either in the lair or that conveyor belt that carried everything up into the furnace. It's a big chain. It's pretty good size. Right below it, you see 2 blocks. Those are probably from the furnace. Those are furnace bricks. This is all the blue, mostly blue stuff. That's why you see it sitting outside. The yellow stuff actually went inside of totes. Next. We'll just quickly go through this. These are what we called stringers, just, slag glass. There's some up here you can see. Pretty cool. Just fun stuff to dig up. And then these are warming pourers, solid pourers. This is what they'd pour into the molds. The very first time they would start using molds after they'd been on the shelf, they'd have to heat them up. And that was the best way to do it. Pour some solid glass in there, get that mold nice and hot, and that way you wouldn't have any issues with the first insulators being made. Just a mix of signals and miscellaneous there with all the dirt on them. Wanted to prove that this really did happen. I didn't stage it. Next. That's all call-it bottles. Just, again, I took samples of everything that I could just to have a sample. Next. Only found one CD 145 piece out of everything that we dug up. We did find 20 CDs out of the 24 CDs known. We at least found, samples of them. These are all pieces of pinch-eared helmets for the most part, kind of to the left half. You can see some ears kind of like right there in the middle. That was the best we did on those. We never found really anything even close to being, whole. And then the bottles, all yellow. They're in tubs. Just open the top for the photo. And then yellow insulators. You see this piece of glass right here? That's what we call the copper glass. We always wondered whether they made those or the insulators that we have seen in the hobby, were they altered? We were never really sure. Well, this is proof that came right out of the dump. They did make a copper-colored glass. And when those are exposed to the UV rays of the sun, that went to a deep burgundy. And I do have samples, and we'll see some photos real quick. But you got the... That thing there, you probably saw it in the other photo. I have no idea what these little hair-like items are, but I carefully cleaned them, put them in this tray. You come up and look at them. Some of them are as thin as hairs, and they're glass. They're made out of yellow glass, and they're straight. Most of them are straight as can be. They were found in a pocket, probably no bigger than that, in the glassmaker's shards, and it was... I have no clue, how those things survived, and they were in a pocket about that big, so I had to save some of them. And like I said, come up and take a look at them. It's pretty incredible. And then more just miscellaneous. You see some cross tops there, just right out of the ground. I actually cleaned all these things one at a time. It must have taken me 3 months. So this was a sorting table. In the front here, you see I sorted out anything that had actually already started to turn purple. Some of these are beautiful two-tones, yellow to purple. Those must have been exposed on the surface for some time, and they had already started to turn. And then everything here is just miscellaneous, and then I started sorting them by CDs. So that's the very first bottle that CGI Co., California Glass Works, made. It's documented. That was the one that was first made in June of 1912. And you'll notice that it's a sort of an aqua color. And again, blue aqua, that was when they were using a different source of sand probably, and they were only producing blue and aqua glass. Everything after that, for the most part, other than one possible exception that I've found since it didn't come out of the dump that was made by then, everything after that was yellow glass, all the ones you see up there. It's interesting because they have what one bottle collector likes to call the watermelon slug plate. So you can identify those very easily by that elongated slug plate, by the embossing, and then the bottles themselves, for being automatic made, they're really crude. They have a lot of waviness to them. They look older than what they really are. And that's the Crown City, the one with the C on the bottom. I mean, in some of the reports, newspaper reports and research, like on Bob's site, I mean, they talked about making prisms and bottles and carboys and, I mean, all kinds of stuff. But, we could never associate it, now we can. So here we go with some samples that I did with sun exposure. So the two at the top were dug right out of the dump. You notice there's a little bit of difference in color. The one on the left is a little more golden. The one on the right has a little green hue to them. Those two pieces were put out in the sun for 3 months, and then that would be the next step down. And you see they're already starting to go to a peach shade. So that's where your peach comes from. They're yellows that have been exposed for a short period of time, and they hadn't really, moved on to the purple shades. You go down to the third level, that's 11 months. Now, suddenly we're picking up a lot of purple. And then down to 3 years, they're still turning. And I've got those back out in the sun, and I think they're going to go a little bit darker yet. So these came right from the dump. I had done research and experiments prior by heating the purple insulators, turning them yellow, and then putting them back out in the sun. But there's, you don't know what's going on in all the chemical changes there. This way, we know exactly what happened by taking two original yellows that we know are original, and they moved pretty fast, faster than I expected them to. What I was going to show you was that piece of copper glass. I had two pieces that were identical to each other, and I put one out in the sun for a couple years, and that's the original copper, and then pick up the other one, Dave, there next to it, and that's after 2 years in the sun. It had gone to fairly deep purple already, so you'll get a better look at that when you come up. We are taking one sample of everything that's different, and we've put most of them already into a category of what we call the CalDig archives. Those will remain together for future research, for future hobbyists, and when Dave and I are gone or whatever. We're not selling any of that. We're not going to profit from any of it. We want to keep it all together. We're kind of joint ownership now, and we have an agreement. One of us goes, the other one takes care of it, and then they'll make arrangements for it to either go to NIA or something. We want to make sure that, there are good samples here for people to research in the future rather than have them scattered out. After we get all that taken care of, there will be a few samples that we may sell. We do have, at least I have, a lot of expenses in research, but that doesn't matter. Todd, he basically said, sell everything if you want to. And I said, that isn't what we want to do. We want to make sure that this is kept pretty much together. So I've seen comments on Facebook that, that it's just a power trip, that we're not selling them because we just want to, keep all the good stuff to ourselves. It's not that. There are telltale signs on these, and the main thing with this is the very top, just underneath the crown on most machine-made bottles, the crown, when it slopes in, it kind of rolls in. These have a little bit sharper drop and come straight in. Robert Frist actually had a hand in making the machine, and he had them made back east and shipped out, but he had a patent for the machine. So it's a little different than any other machine I've ever seen, as far as the bottles. So like I said, and you'll notice when you go up and look at them closer, they're really crude looking. I mean, they're wavy. They actually had a slug that was blown into a mold, and then that slug was taken out and moved into the bottom mold, and then it was blown out so that you get even distribution of the glass. And there was something going on with that machine where it didn't really blow it up hard against the side where it'd be smooth. It left it kind of wavy. Okay, we didn't find any pieces of 200s, none at all. We did find the top of a 2-piece, but we didn't find the bottom. We did not find the 187, which some people like to call the mine insulator or the Brown's pony. And then the fourth one was the 164 unembossed. Now we did find, and that was part of the slide presentation, we did find as some people call them, the cricket heads, the 210. And it was always suspected that they made those, but now we found two shards of those on the property, so we know they made those. That particular CD and the 164 are the only two that California made that were unembossed with their name on them. But we did not find a 164 piece at all. So those were the four. Where's the piece of the 200, Dave? You lifted that up before, yeah? No, the 200. I'm sorry, the 2-piece.
Oh yeah, over here.
Yeah, that's the best we did for a 2-piece, but it's a top and it beautiful yellow. Yeah, we did find 2 that said California on them that were embossed California. We actually found one that was unembossed, large egg. Yeah, and they're up here. Come up and take a look at them. And then when you saw the photos of them, I don't know how well you saw them, but they actually have an injection point. If you're familiar with California eggs, you always see that grind spot on one side of them. That was the injection spot in the mold, and it left a little dimple, in some cases, almost an inch long. And what they did was they ground those down, probably knocked them off, and then they ground them down smooth so there wasn't any sharp glass there. Most of the ones you see up here are going to have that dimple still in place. All the RPF eggs had that dimple, except for one. There was one RPF egg that was ground down. So again, I think Frist was experimenting with his newly made molds, and he ground that down on one of them, and he was probably ready to go to production, and then he got booted for some reason. And he did have a lawsuit against the new company. They got settled, and it might have been over the patent on those. Who knows? And I did research on every board member of the company, and it's been really hard finding much on some of these guys. On Robert Frist, I found all kinds of information going way back to his history back east, all the way up to working there and even after. I mean, the guy continued to make patents. He made, fruit pitting machines after he left there, a man's collar, a style of a man. I mean, the guy was into everything. But I went into Ancestry.com, and I did make contact with a couple distant relatives because I'd love to get a photograph. I want to know what this guy looks like. He was an incredible guy. You'll learn that in the book. And I have not found anything yet. I contacted, one guy that was in the family, and he said, no, I don't know of any photographs, and I'm kind of distant, from. And then you'll notice when you look at the bottles, there were 2 different styles. You had the tall, with a stubby shoulder on it, and you had the more sloped side. Those are the 2 styles they made. You can see, the consistency, the embossing, the slug plates are the same. Those are 2 unembossed. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's one guy and Dave actually dug a dump there in Long Beach and found one like that way back. Had no clue.
It was
yeah.
California.
And the guy that we know, I'll mention his name. Some of you may know him, Ed Kuski. Big digger in Southern California and now lives in Pennsylvania. He has, I think, 3 of those styles, and then the one that from Hemet, California, that was unknown in his possession. Dave and I will be up here. Please come up and take a look. Thanks for hanging in there.
They got out of there, or did they throw it out?